The sun was setting on the small town of Millfield, and 16-year-old Sarah knew she had to get home before it got too dark. She had spent the afternoon hiking in the nearby forest, enjoying the cool breeze and the beauty of the autumn leaves. As she made her way back to town, she noticed that the sky was getting darker and the shadows of the trees were growing longer. Sarah quickened her pace, but as she walked, she realized that something was wrong. She couldn't see the familiar landmarks she knew so well, and the path seemed to be leading her deeper into the forest instead of back to town. She looked around, feeling a sense of unease. The forest had always been a peaceful place, but now it seemed dark and foreboding, and she felt like someone was watching her. She started to run, her heart pounding in her chest, and her breathing becoming faster and more shallow. Suddenly, she stumbled and fell, her ankle twisting painfully. She cried out in pain and looked up to see a figure looming over her. It was a man, but he looked strange, with pale skin and long, pointed teeth. He leaned in close to her, and Sarah could smell the scent of blood on his breath. She tried to scream, but the man put a hand over her mouth, muffling her cries for help. Sarah struggled, but the man was too strong for her, and soon she felt her consciousness slipping away. She felt herself being lifted off the ground and carried deeper into the forest. And then everything went black. When Sarah woke up, she was in a strange room, lying on a cold stone floor. She looked around and saw that the walls were covered in moss and vines, and there were no windows or doors. She tried to move, but found that she was bound to the wall with chains. As she struggled, she heard a sound, a soft hissing noise, like someone breathing. She looked up and saw the same man who had attacked her in the forest. He was standing in front of her, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. "You're awake," he said softly, his voice echoing in the small room. "I'm sorry I had to do that to you, but I was so hungry. And you were so delicious." Sarah shuddered, feeling sick with fear. She realized that the man was a vampire and she was his prisoner. She knew that she had to find a way to escape before it was too late. Days passed, and Sarah was still trapped in the vampire's lair. She was weak from hunger and thirst, and she felt like she was losing her mind. She had tried everything she could think of to escape, but the chains were too strong and the walls were too thick. One night, as she lay in her chains, she heard a sound. It was a soft tapping, like someone was scratching on the walls. She looked up and saw a tiny hole in the stone, just big enough for her to peek through. She looked out and saw a glimmer of light, and then she heard a voice. It was a young girl, about her own age, and she sounded scared and lost. "Hello," Sarah whispered. "Who's there?" The girl didn't answer, but Sarah could hear her breathing. She looked closer and saw that the girl was covered in scratches and bruises, like she had been attacked by something. Sarah knew that the girl was in danger, and she had to help her. She started to work on the chains, trying to loosen them so she could escape. Finally, after hours of struggling, she felt the chains give way and she was free. She crawled through the tiny hole and saw the girl on the other side, looking up at her with wide eyes. "Come on," Sarah whispered, holding out a hand. "We have to get out of here." The girl took Sarah's hand, and they started to run, following a narrow tunnel that led out of the vampire's lair. As they ran, they heard the sound of footsteps behind them, and Sarah knew that the vampire was coming after them. They burst out into the night air, and Sarah looked around, trying to figure out where they were. They were in a clearing, surrounded by tall trees, and she could see the faint glow of the town in the distance. "Come on," she said, pulling the girl along. "We have to get to the town. We'll be safe there." They ran as fast as they could, but the vampire was still behind them, his footsteps getting closer and closer. Sarah felt her heart pounding in her chest, and she knew that they had to find a way to escape. Suddenly, she saw a glimmer of light up ahead, and she realized that they were close to the town. She pushed the girl forward, urging her to run faster, and they burst out into the street, gasping for breath. As they looked around, they saw that the town was deserted and all the lights were off. They realized that the vampire had followed them into the town, and they were trapped. Suddenly, they heard a sound, a soft hissing noise, like someone breathing. They turned around and saw the vampire standing in front of them, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. "You thought you could escape me," he said softly. "But you were wrong. I always get what I want." Sarah and the girl backed away, but they knew that they had no chance against the vampire. Suddenly, Sarah remembered something her grandmother had told her a story about a powerful weapon that could destroy vampires. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wooden stake, and then she lunged at the vampire, plunging the stake into his chest. The vampire screamed in pain, and then he burst into flames, burning away to ash in a matter of seconds. Sarah and the girl looked at each other in shock, realizing that they had survived. They stumbled back to town, and Sarah went to the police, telling them everything that had happened. They searched the forest and found the remains of other victims, proving that the vampire had been preying on the town for years. Sarah and the girl became best friends, bonded by their shared experience, and they vowed to never let anyone else suffer the same fate. They knew that the forest would always be a dangerous place, but they also knew that they had the strength and courage to survive anything that came their way.